Do you know the hidden histories behind the silent walls? Have you ever thought about the young women whose dreams were stolen, whose lives were sealed away, not by choice but by decree? From the 16th to the 19th centuries, thousands of women across Europe faced a fate worse than death for many: forced cloistering. Here are 10 heartbreaking stories uncovered from the shadows of history of women whose voices were silenced, but whose struggles echo through time. Number 1. The Veiled Widow of Venice. The grand Venetian palace, once bustling with the laughter of servants and the hushed negotiations of merchants, had fallen silent around Isabella Contarini. She was a woman of 35, a widow for 2 years, and mistress of a vast, intricate web of shipping routes and trade agreements that her late husband, a man twice her age, had meticulously built. Isabella had learned the business faster than any of her husband's male apprentices, her mind sharp, her memory for figures precise, her understanding of human nature keen. She managed their assets with a quiet competence that earned grudging respect even from the most seasoned traders in the Rialto market. Her husband had left no sons, only Isabella and their 2 young daughters, a detail that now threatened to unravel her carefully constructed life. Her husband's brother, Marco, a man whose ambition was as boundless as his personal debts, saw Isabella's competence not as an asset to the family, but as an obstacle to his own schemes. He coveted the Contarini wealth, viewing it as his birthright, despite the fact that his brother's will clearly designated Isabella as the sole executor and primary inheritor until their eldest daughter, Elena, came of age. Marco's legal challenges had been dismissed, his claims to mismanagement laughed out of court. But Marco was not a man to be deterred by legality when a more ancient, insidious power could be brought to bear. The whispers began subtly at first, carried on the canal's evening breeze, drifting into the salons where Isabella conducted her meetings. They spoke of a woman too independent, a widow, too unwilling to remarry into a family that could manage her affairs. They hinted at a spirit too worldly for a woman of her standing, neglecting her spiritual duties in favor of earthly gains. These were the seeds of ruin for a woman in Venice, where reputation was as fragile as Murano glass. Then came the accusations, unsubstantiated but potent. Her meetings with male traders, once seen as professional, were painted as illicit. Her late-night calculations, once a sign of diligence, became evidence of unchaste liaisons. Isabella felt the walls closing in, not the stone walls of a building, but the invisible, suffocating walls of societal condemnation. Her former allies began to shy away, their gazes dropping when she approached. Her own family, distant relatives who had once admired her acumen, now urged caution, suggesting she might need to seek a spiritual retreat to purify her soul. They spoke of the convent of Santa Chiara, a place known for its strict discipline and its isolation from the city's worldly clamor. The pressure mounted. Marco began to spread stories to the local ecclesiastical authorities, painting Isabella as a woman of questionable morals, a danger to the spiritual well-being of her daughters. He argued that her involvement in trade was unseemly, that her independent spirit was a sign of a soul straying from God's path. He used the very piety of the age against her. In the 17th century, the role of a respectable widow was often seen as one of quiet devotion, not active commerce. A widow managing an estate of such size, especially one dealing with the rough world of shipping, was an anomaly that many found unsettling. One cold, damp morning, a somber-faced delegation arrived at her palace. It included not only Marco and his legal counsel, but also a representative from the local bishopric, carrying a formal mandate. They claimed to be acting out of concern for her spiritual health and the moral upbringing of her daughters. They stated that her worldliness had become a scandal, that her soul was in peril. The document they presented, draped in official seals, stated that Isabella Contarini was to enter the convent of Santa Chiara for a period of spiritual reflection and purification, to seek a cloistered life for the salvation of her soul. It was presented as a charitable act, a rescue. Isabella knew it was nothing of the sort. It was a forced removal, a legal maneuver orchestrated by Marco to seize control of her estate. She tried to argue, to present her ledgers, to call upon her reputation. But her voice, once commanding in the market, now faltered against the cold, unyielding authority of the church and the ruthless ambition of her brother-in-law. Her daughters, Elena and Sophia, clung to her skirts, their small faces confused and frightened. Within days, Isabella was escorted through the narrow streets of Venice, the gondola gliding silently through the mist-shrouded canals, carrying her not to a trading meeting, but to the heavy wooden doors of Santa Chiara. Convent, perched on a quiet island, seemed to swallow her whole. The air inside was still and cold, heavy with the scent of beeswax and old stone. Her rich velvet gowns and silk petticoats were replaced with the rough wool habit of a novice. Her long dark hair, once elegantly coiled, was shorn. Her name, Isabella Contarini, the independent merchant, was replaced with Sister Agnes. Life in Santa Chiara was a stark contrast to her previous existence. The days were structured by the tolling of bells, marking the hours for prayer, contemplation, and manual labor. There were no ledgers, no trade routes, no challenging negotiations. Instead, there were endless litanies, meticulous embroidery of altar cloths, and silent meals. Her mind, once racing with figures and strategies, now felt starved. The sisters, many of whom had entered the convent as children, knew nothing of the world outside its walls. They were pious, gentle, but utterly alien to Isabella's experiences. Her only solace was the occasional brief visits from Elena and Sophia, always chaperoned by a stern nun and Marco's watchful eye. Her daughters grew before her eyes, their faces changing, their childhood slipping away without her guiding hand. She tried to explain, to impart what she could of her knowledge of the world, but her words felt thin and hollow, swallowed by the convent's silence. Marco had ensured that her contact with the outside world was minimal, and her daughters were slowly being tutored to believe their mother had chosen this path out of a sudden, profound spiritual awakening. Isabella, now Sister Agnes, endured. She performed her duties with a mechanical precision, her body present but her mind often adrift, reliving the bustling markets, the salty tang of the sea, the laughter of her children in her palace gardens. She would sometimes trace the complex shipping routes on the rough wooden table in her cell, using crumbs of bread for ships, a secret act of defiance against the forced stillness of her new life. Her heart ached for her daughters, for the life that had been stolen from her, for the injustice that had sealed her away. The convent, meant to be a place of salvation, felt more like a tomb, burying not just her worldly life, but the very essence of who she was. The bells of Santa Chiara, which marked the passage of time for the sisters, simply counted the slow, agonizing years of Isabella's captivity. She often wondered if Elena, now a young woman, would ever truly know the truth of her mother's fate, or if the Contarini legacy would forever be lost to the machinations of a greedy uncle. Number 2. The Silent Saint of Lorraine. Geneviève Dubois was not born for silence. From her earliest days in the sprawling, cold chateau in Lorraine, during the late 17th century, her voice was a constant presence. She sang hymns with fervent devotion, recited poetry with dramatic flair, and debated theology with the local priest with an astonishing, if sometimes unsettling, intellectual rigor. Her parents, devoutly Catholic, saw in her a sign of divine grace, a child blessed with an unusual spiritual intensity. They spoke often of her entering a convent, not as a duty or a burden, but as the fulfillment of a sacred calling. She, however, saw the convent as a distant, abstract possibility, a path for others, not for her. Genevieve dreamed of a life filled with books, with intellectual discourse, with a vibrant world of ideas that barely reached their isolated estate. She devoured every tome in her father's modest library, from ancient philosophies to the more daring scientific texts of the age. She yearned for a university, a place where her mind could truly unfurl, even though such institutions were largely closed to women. She secretly corresponded with a distant cousin, a scholar living in Paris, discussing Latin translations and the latest intellectual debates. This cousin Antoine was her window to the world, her intellectual equal, and in time the silent recipient of her youthful affection. Her parents, however, interpreted her intellectual fervor as a sign of piety, her intensity as spiritual devotion. They heard her impassioned arguments about theology as a sign of her calling, rather than an expression of a sharp, questioning mind. They saw her solitary hours with books, not as intellectual pursuit, but as silent contemplation, a preparation for a life consecrated to God. They were proud of her perceived sanctity, often boasting to their neighbors about their little saint. The decision was made not as a question, but as a pronouncement. Genevieve, at the tender age of 18, was to enter the Ursuline convent of St. Pierre, a cloistered order known for its rigorous intellectual and spiritual discipline. Her parents saw it as the perfect setting for their gifted daughter, a place where her intellect could be harnessed for God's glory, where her spirit could soar. They spoke of the convent's famed library, its quiet gardens, conducive to prayer, its reputation for nurturing holy women. Genevieve was horrified. The thought of permanent enclosure, of surrendering her personal liberty, of being cut off from the very world she yearned to explore, filled her with a profound dread. She tried to explain, to articulate her desires, her intellectual ambitions, her quiet longing for a life beyond the convent walls. She spoke of her love for knowledge, of her desire to use her mind in the world. Her parents listened with kind smiles, nodding in apparent understanding, but their resolve remained unshaken. They saw her protestations not as genuine desire for another life, but as the devil's temptation, the worldly resistance to God's calling. They truly believed they were saving her soul, guiding her towards an eternal reward. Their love for her was intertwined with their strict, unwavering faith, and they could not conceive of a better path for her. The farewell was a somber affair. Genevieve stood before the heavy oaken doors of St. Pierre, a monumental barrier between her past and her future. Her mother, tears streaming down her face, embraced her tightly, whispering prayers and blessings. Her father, his face stern but filled with what he believed was righteous conviction, placed a hand on her head, offering a final blessing. The doors swung shut, sealing her away. Life inside St. Pierre was indeed intellectually stimulating, but in a way that felt like a gilded cage. Convent library was vast, filled with ancient texts, theological treatises, and classical literature. But the purpose of study was devotion, not independent inquiry. Debates were encouraged, but only within the confines of established doctrine. Her days were a rigid schedule of communal prayer, spiritual reading, and quiet work, interspersed with periods of silent contemplation. The silence, which her parents had seen as a virtue, became a torment. Her vibrant mind, accustomed to unfettered exploration, felt constrained like a bird in a beautiful but too small cage. She tried to find solace in the very things that had drawn her parents to this choice: the books, the quiet contemplation. She delved into theological texts, finding a fleeting satisfaction in the intricate arguments, but it was a satisfaction often tinged with bitterness. She wrote in secret, filling margins of permitted prayer books with her own thoughts, her frustrations, her intellectual inquiries, knowing these words would never see the light of day. She continued to correspond with her cousin Antoine, but the letters were heavily censored by the convent superior, strict of anything personal, anything hinting at her true feelings, anything that might challenge her new identity as Sister Marie-Thérèse, the name she had been given upon her profession. The connection frayed, then broke. Genevieve. The vibrant, intellectual girl slowly became Sister Marie-Thérèse, the outwardly pious, inwardly yearning nun. Her beautiful voice, once so full of life, grew quieter, reserved for the chanting of hymns. Her sharp mind, once eager to debate, learned the art of silence and internal discourse. She performed her duties impeccably, a model of monastic obedience. But beneath the calm exterior, her spirit remained a whirlwind of unspoken thoughts, unasked questions, and profound regret. She looked out from the cloister garden at the distant hills of Lorraine, knowing that beyond them lay a world of knowledge and experience that would forever remain beyond her grasp. The silence that her parents had wished for her was not peaceful, but a profound, unending quiet, filled only with the echoes of the life she could have lived. Number 3. The Broken Vows of Verona. Giulia Moretti lived for the sun-drenched vibrancy of Verona in the early 18th century, a city of ancient stones and passionate hearts. Her life was a symphony of color and emotion, filled with the aroma of flowering jasmine, the sound of street musicians, and the exhilarating rush of her secret love for Lorenzo, a young artisan whose hands, though stained with dye and clay, were as tender as his heart. Giulia, the spirited daughter of a wealthy merchant, was meant for a grand marriage, a union that would solidify her family's social standing and financial prosperity. Her parents had chosen a suitor for her, an older, respected nobleman from a powerful Florentine family, a match that promised security and influence, but Giulia had already given her heart. Lorenzo was everything her parents disapproved of: passionate, poor, and from a different social class. Their love blossomed in stolen moments, in moonlit gardens and hushed whispers along the Adige River. They exchanged small, meaningful tokens, each a silent promise of a shared future. Their love was a defiance of the rigid societal structures that dictated who could marry whom, a dangerous game played with the highest stakes. Their secret, as all secrets in a city as close-knit as Verona, eventually found its way into the light. A servant, loyal to the family, discovered their clandestine meetings and reported them to Giulia's father. The revelation was met with a storm of fury. Her father, a man whose honor was paramount, saw her actions as an unbearable stain on the family name, a betrayal of their trust and a scandalous rejection of the arranged marriage. The Florentine nobleman, upon hearing the whispers, withdrew his offer. The family's reputation tarnished by the rumors of Giulia's unchastity, the family's solution was swift and brutal. To cleanse the stain on their honor, to ensure no further scandals, and to salvage any hope of future alliances for her younger sisters, Giulia was to be sent away. Convent was deemed the only acceptable course of action, not merely for her soul's salvation, but for the restoration of the family's shattered reputation. The Cistercian convent of Santa Maria della Pace, known for its strict cloister and severe discipline, was chosen. It was a place where fallen women, or those who brought shame, were often sent to disappear from society's eyes. Giulia's pleas, her tears, her declarations of love for Lorenzo, fell on deaf ears. Her parents saw her defiance as stubbornness, her passion as sin. She was told she had disgraced them, squandered her chances, and now must atone. Lorenzo, heartbroken and powerless, attempted to appeal to her father, but he was dismissed with threats and warnings to stay away. The day of her departure was shrouded in a heavy, unnatural silence. Giulia, dressed in a simple, dark gown, felt like a prisoner being led to her execution. As she stepped into the carriage, She caught a fleeting glimpse of Lorenzo hidden in the shadows across the street, his face a mask of grief and despair. Their eyes met, a silent farewell that tore at her soul. It was a bond of love that no convent walls could ever truly break, but one that would forever remain unfulfilled. Santa Maria della Pace was a stark, formidable place, its walls thick and its routines unyielding. The joyous colors of Verona were replaced by shades of gray and brown. The melodic sounds of the city gave way to the monotonous chanting of prayers, the rustling of habits, and the distant tolling of bells. Julia, stripped of her elegant clothes, her long dark hair shorn, was renamed Sister Benedicta. The life of a novice was one of grueling spiritual exercises, endless tasks, and enforced silence. She learned to scrub floors, cultivate vegetables in the garden, and copy manuscripts with painstaking precision. Every chore, every prayer was meant to cleanse her of her worldly attachments, to break her spirit until she was compliant. The hardest part was the enforced separation from the outside world, from any news of Lorenzo. She often stole moments by the small gridded window in her cell, gazing out at the distant hills, imagining him still in Verona, working his craft, remembering her. The memory of his touch, the warmth of his smile, became her most guarded treasure, a secret rebellion against the convent's attempts to erase her past. She resisted in quiet ways. When the Mother Superior spoke of her earthly attachments as sinful, Julia would feign piety, but in her heart she cherished the memory of Lorenzo, holding onto it as a defiance against the convent's relentless efforts to make her forget. She refused to truly give herself to the spiritual life, her mind often wandering during prayers, her heart aching with a profound, unshakable sorrow. She became skilled at feigning devotion, her outward obedience hiding a raging storm of grief and resentment. Years passed. The vibrant girl from Verona transformed into a quiet, reserved woman, her eyes holding a deep, unreadable sadness. She became adept at surviving within the convent's rigid structure, her outward calm belying an inner turmoil. She sometimes saw other women brought to the convent, their faces marked by similar stories of scandal or defiance, and a silent understanding passed between them. Julia, Sister Benedicta, remained cloistered, her love for Lorenzo, a love that had once been her greatest joy, now her eternal heartbreak, sealed away behind the heavy, silent walls of Santa Maria della Pace. Her vows were not of devotion but of a broken spirit, forced into a life she never chose. Number 4. The Unwanted Daughter of Dublin. In the mid-19th century, in a respectable but not wealthy Dublin household, Eleanor Connell was the fourth daughter, born in quick succession. Her father, a struggling clerk, had hoped desperately for a son and heir to carry on the family name and perhaps, God willing, improve their fortunes. Each girl born after the first was met with a deeper sigh, a more strained silence at the dinner table. Eleanor, with her bright, inquisitive eyes and quick wit, was keenly aware of her position in the family. An expense, a burden, another mouth to feed, another dowry to somehow procure. Her older sisters, though loved, were already proving difficult to marry off. The dowry system in Ireland, as in much of Europe, placed immense financial pressure on families with many daughters. Convent, for many such families, offered a financially viable solution, albeit one wrapped in religious piety. It was often significantly cheaper to place a daughter in a religious order, paying a smaller entrance fee or dowry to God, than to provide a suitable dowry for a marriage into a respectable family. Eleanor was only 14 when the conversations began, hushed and strained, revolving around her future. She heard phrases like, "a life of devotion," "God's calling," and "a noble path." But she also understood the underlying truth. Her family could not afford her. She saw her mother's tear-filled eyes, her father's grim determination. She was chosen not for her piety, which was no more or less than any other girl her age, but for her dispensability. Her older sisters were married off with great difficulty, their dowries scraping together what little the family had. But for Eleanor there was nothing left. She was told it was her duty, a sacrifice for the family, a way to alleviate the financial strain. The Sisters of Mercy convent in the heart of Dublin, a place known for its charitable work and its strict regimen, was chosen. It was a respected institution, and sending a daughter there would bring a certain prestige to the family, even if it was born out of financial necessity. Eleanor felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She loved her family, despite the unspoken burden she represented, and she understood their desperation. But her own dreams were simple: a small cottage, a kind husband, perhaps a child or two, a life of quiet domesticity. She loved to read, to tend a small garden, to listen to the lively street music of Dublin. The thought of a life walled off from the world, from sunlight and song, filled her with despair. She tried to articulate her feelings, to express her fears, but her words were dismissed as girlish fancies, as a worldly resistance to God's plan for her. "It is for your own good, child," her mother would say, tears running down her cheeks, "and for ours." The day she entered the convent, the gray Dublin sky seemed to mirror her heart. The heavy wooden doors clanged shut behind her, a final, definitive sound that echoed the closing of her life's possibilities. Inside, the world was dim, hushed, and cold. The familiar sounds of the city, the shouts of street vendors, the clip-clop of horse hooves, were replaced by the rustle of habits and the soft murmuring of prayers. Her own clothes, her meager possessions were taken away, replaced by the coarse wool habit and simple sandals of a novice. Her long brown hair, which her mother used to lovingly braid, was cut brutally short. Her name Eleanor was erased, and she became Sister Agnes, another anonymous figure in a sea of black and white. Life, as Sister Agnes was, a monotonous cycle of prayer work and silence. She rose before dawn, attended multiple masses, cleaned the convent, tended to the sick in the convent's small infirmary, and performed countless other chores. The sisters were kind, for the most part, but their kindness was rooted in their own unwavering faith and their acceptance of this life. They spoke of spiritual joy, of finding peace in God's service. But Eleanor felt only a gnawing emptiness, a quiet sadness that never truly left her. She found small ways to cope. She focused on the intricacies of the infirmary work, finding a quiet satisfaction in easing the suffering of others, a practical outlet for her empathetic nature. She would sometimes steal glances out of the convent windows, catching glimpses of the bustling street life, imagining the people outside going about their ordinary lives, lives she had been denied. She learned to mimic the outward expressions of piety, her face serene during prayer, her hands clasped in devotion, while her mind was often miles away recalling the scent of fresh bread from a baker's cart, or the sound of a distant fiddle from a pub. The years passed, marked only by the change of seasons and the occasional illness that swept through the convent. Her family visited rarely, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and a quiet sadness that they tried to hide. They spoke of her devotion, her calling, never acknowledging the reality of her forced sacrifice. Eleanor, the unwanted daughter, learned to live with the silence, with the knowledge that her life had been a transaction, a way for her family to survive. Sister Agnes was her new identity. But the girl who loved the vibrancy of Dublin, who yearned for a life of her own choosing, remained trapped beneath the layers of wool and prayer, a silent, enduring heartbreak. Number 5. The burden of bodily frailty. In the sun-drenched region of Provence, France, in the early 17th century, a young girl named Colette Dubois lived a life of quiet suffering. From birth, Colette had been fragile. Her body often racked with fevers, her limbs prone to weakness and tremors. Her family, minor gentry, had poured their meager resources into finding cures, consulting physicians and appealing to saints, but Colette's health remained precarious. She was not outwardly deformed, but her delicate constitution made her unsuited for the physical demands of marriage and childbearing, which were the primary roles for women of her standing. Colette was also remarkably intelligent and sensitive, with a deep love for stories and the natural world. She spent hours in the chateau's small, unkempt garden, observing the insects and birds or hidden away in a quiet corner with a book, escaping into tales of adventure and romance. Her mind was sharp, her spirit surprisingly resilient despite her physical struggles. But in a society where a woman's worth was often measured by her ability to bear healthy children and manage a household, Colette's frailty made her a significant burden. Her parents, though they loved her, saw no viable future for her in the outside world. Marriage would be difficult, requiring a generous dowry to overlook her physical limitations, and even then there was no guarantee of a successful union or healthy offspring. They feared she would be ostracized, become a ward of her siblings, or simply live a life of dependent misery. Convent, therefore, presented itself as a practical, even charitable solution. It offered a protected environment, a community where her needs could be met, and a spiritual purpose that could elevate her suffering into something sacred. The Convent of the Holy Sepulchre, a Benedictine order renowned for its quiet contemplation and emphasis on spiritual growth, was chosen. It was a place where women were cared for, where their physical needs were met within the confines of a strict, disciplined routine. Her parents spoke of it as God's special plan for her, a path to spiritual enlightenment, a refuge from the harshness of the world. Colette at 15 understood the unspoken message. She was too weak for the world, too much of a burden, too frail to be a wife or mother. Her fragility had condemned her. Colette's protests were weak, her voice often trembling. She spoke of her quiet dreams, her love for the sun on her skin, her longing for a life that was not confined. But her words were heard as the fanciful musings of a sickly girl, not the genuine desires of a young woman. Her parents, convinced they were acting in her best interests, praying for her soul and her earthly comfort, gently but firmly guided her towards her new life. The day she left home, the scent of lavender from the Provençal hills filled the air, a scent she knew she would miss inside the cold stone walls. The chateau, though modest, had felt like a place of comfort, her sanctuary. The convent, by contrast, felt like a prison. The heavy wooden doors, once closed, seemed to seal away not only her body, but her spirit. Her clothes, soft and comforting, were replaced by the rough wool of the habit, a fabric that seemed to chafe against her delicate skin. Her long, delicate hair, a source of quiet pride, was shorn without ceremony. Her name, Colette, was discarded for Sister Claire. Life as Sister Claire was a paradox. Convent did indeed provide a structured, protective environment. The meals were simple but regular. The infirmary well tended. The other sisters were, for the most part, kind and gentle, accustomed to caring for one another. The relentless daily routine, the early rising for matins, the long hours of communal prayer, the physical demands of kneeling and standing, all took a toll on Colette's fragile body. Her weakness was often perceived as a lack of spiritual fortitude, a sign of her worldly attachments. She was often encouraged to pray more, to seek strength through fasting, which only exacerbated her physical struggles. Her intelligent mind, once free to wander through stories and observations, was now confined to repetitive spiritual exercises and theological texts. There were no news stories of adventure, no quiet moments to observe the world outside her window. She felt a profound sense of loneliness, not from lack of company, but from a complete disconnect from the world she had yearned for, from the life she had imagined. She learned to adapt to manage her physical limitations within the convent's structure, but the adaptation came at a cost to her spirit. Sister Claire found solace in the convent's quiet gardens when her health allowed, seeking the small patches of sunlight, feeling the breeze on her face, a fleeting connection to the world she had lost. She found comfort in the meticulous copying of illuminated manuscripts, her delicate hands finding a quiet artistry in the precise strokes, her mind able to drift into the patterns of the letters. But these were small comforts against the overwhelming reality of her forced existence. The walls of the convent, built to protect her, also imprisoned her. Her frail body, the reason for her enclosure, became a constant reminder of the life that had been denied to her, the life of a woman who was seen as a burden and, therefore, removed. Her spirit, though resilient, slowly dimmed within the confines of her unexpected lifelong cloister. Number 6. The inheritance of Sister Juliana. The grand estate of the de Montaigne family in central France during the late 16th century was a place of ancestral pride and intricate legal battles. Jean-Luc de Montaigne, the patriarch, found himself in a precarious position. He had 3 daughters, a burden in an age where dowries could bankrupt even wealthy families, and only one son, Antoine, who was sickly and weak. The family's legacy, their lands and their prestige, hinged entirely on Antoine inheriting the full estate unencumbered by the financial demands of marrying off his sisters. Juliana, the eldest daughter, was a woman of fiery spirit and strong opinions, keenly aware of the injustices inherent in the patriarchal system. She often challenged her father's decisions, speaking her mind even when it was deemed unfitting for a woman. Juliana was also secretly betrothed to a young man from a neighboring estate, a second son who, like her, had little to inherit but a shared love for the land and a vision for its improvement. Their union, though not grand, was based on genuine affection and mutual respect, a quiet rebellion against the arranged marriages common among the nobility. The de Montaigne family's finances were strained, and the prospect of providing 3 substantial dowries weighed heavily on Jean-Luc. The customary dowry to God required for a convent placement, while still significant, was considerably less than a marriage dowry, and crucially, it eliminated the future claims of a married daughter and her potential offspring on the family's assets. It was a common tactic in such situations to remove inconvenient daughters to secure the inheritance for the male heir. Juliana, with her strong will and her inconvenient affection for a man of lesser standing, became the prime candidate. Her father argued that her stubbornness and worldly nature made her an ideal candidate for a life of spiritual discipline, a path that would save her soul while simultaneously securing the family's future. He presented it as a divine calling, a pious sacrifice. He also knew that her presence, her challenges to his authority, made his household less manageable. Juliana was 17 when her father, with a solemn expression, announced her fate. She was to enter the Abbey of Sainte Claire, a strict, enclosed Benedictine convent, known for its ancient lineage and its rigorous adherence to monastic rule. Her protests were met with stern lectures on duty, piety, and the welfare of the family name. Her secret love, discovered by a watchful servant, was used as further evidence of her unsuitability for marriage and her need for spiritual correction. Her young man, powerless, was banished from the estate and threatened with ruin if he ever approached the de Montaignes again. The day she left, the ancient stones of the de Montaigne chateau felt cold and unyielding. Carriage ride to the abbey was silent, punctuated only by her father's occasional sigh. As the massive wooden doors of St. Clair swung shut behind her, a sense of crushing finality settled upon her. The vibrant world she had known, the fields she loved, the man she adored, all vanished behind the impenetrable walls. Her elegant gowns were replaced by the rough, plain habit of the Benedictines. Her long, dark hair, a symbol of her youthful vitality, was shorn by the hands of a cold, silent nun. Her name, Juliana, was replaced by Sister Benedicta, a name meant to symbolize her new compliant identity. Life in St. Clare was a stark, unyielding rhythm of prayer, contemplation, and arduous physical labor. The nuns rose before dawn for matins, their voices a monotone drone in the echoing chapel. Days were filled with manual tasks, washing clothes in cold water, tending the abbey's expansive gardens, preparing simple meals and copying texts in the scriptorium. There was little warmth, little comfort, little personal space. The silence, initially unnerving, became a suffocating presence. Sister Benedicta, the vibrant Juliana, struggled. Her strong will, once a source of her strength, now became a burden. She performed her duties with a quiet resentment, her hands working mechanically while her mind replayed memories of her lost love, her lost freedom, her lost inheritance. She often gazed from her narrow cell window at the distant fields, imagining her beloved tilling the soil, living the life that had been denied to her. The thought that her sacrifice had secured her sickly brother's future, a brother who would likely never enjoy the robust life she had yearned for, filled her with a bitter irony. She found tiny acts of defiance. She would sometimes intentionally misplace a prayer book or leave a chore half-finished. Small, nearly imperceptible acts of rebellion against the crushing weight of her new life. She also found solace in the ancient texts in the scriptorium, finding hidden stories of women who had defied convention, or of saints whose lives were marked by quiet rebellion. She learned to control her outward expressions, her face serene during prayer, her hands clasped in apparent devotion, while her heart was a battlefield of grief and anger. Years turned into decades. Sister Benedicta became an integral part of the abbey, known for her quiet efficiency and her detached demeanor. The fiery spirit of Juliana de Montaigne was buried deep beneath layers of habit and enforced piety. She saw other young women enter the convent, some willingly, others like her, driven by unseen forces. She recognized the same quiet despair in their eyes. The abbey walls, meant to protect the sanctity of her soul, had instead become a monument to a life stolen, to an inheritance seized, and to a passionate heart forever broken by the economic realities of a bygone age. Her story was a silent testament to the devastating power of family ambition and societal constraints. Number 7. The unsuitable match of Lisbon. In the bustling, sun-drenched city of Lisbon, Portugal, in the early 18th century, Mariana de Silva was a woman of intelligence and quiet political awareness, a rare trait for a young noblewoman of her time. Her family, the de Silvas, were powerful with deep roots in the royal court, and their political influence was vast. Mariana was expected to make a marriage that would further solidify this power, perhaps to a high-ranking military officer or a prominent courtier. However, Mariana, with her sharp mind, had formed her own opinions about the political landscape, opinions that sometimes diverged from her family's staunchly conservative views. She admired reformists, spoke of social justice, and even dared to suggest that the common people deserved a greater voice. Her family was horrified by her liberal leanings. In a time of strict social hierarchies and absolute monarchies, such ideas were not merely unorthodox, but dangerous. They could threaten the family's standing, their access to power, and even their safety. Mariana was seen as a potential liability, her outspokenness a threat to their carefully constructed network of influence. She was also betrothed to a distant cousin, a man twice her age, known for his unwavering loyalty to the crown and his rigid adherence to tradition. Mariana abhorred the match, finding her fiancé's views archaic and his company stifling. She refused to marry him quietly but firmly. Her refusal, combined with her increasingly unsuitable political views, led her family to a desperate decision. They could not allow a daughter of their house to bring scandal or political disfavor upon them. Sending her to a convent, cloistered away from the world, would remove her from the political arena, silence her dissenting voice, and prevent her from bringing any further embarrassment to the family name. It was a political maneuver, disguised as a spiritual calling. Convent of São Bento de Saúde, a prodigious Benedictine establishment, known for its strict cloister and the noble women who often filled its cells, was chosen. It was a place where difficult or politically inconvenient daughters were often placed, their absence from court quickly forgotten. Her parents, cloaking their true motives in pious rhetoric, declared that Mariana had shown an unusual inclination towards a life of spiritual devotion, and that it was God's will she enter the cloister. Mariana protested vehemently, arguing for her right to choose her own path, for the validity of her political beliefs. She spoke of her yearning for meaningful engagement with the world, not its abandonment. But her pleas were dismissed as youthful folly, as the devil's temptation to stray from a righteous path. Her father, a man of formidable power, simply stated that the family's honor and future depended on her obedience. There was no recourse, no avenue for appeal in a society where a father's authority over his daughters was absolute. The day she was escorted to São Bento de Saúde, the vibrant sounds and scents of Lisbon, the city she loved, seemed to mock her with their freedom. The heavy iron gates of the convent clanged shut behind her, echoing with a chilling finality. Inside, the world was dim, hushed, and overwhelmingly disciplined. Her rich silk gowns and elaborate herald's wheels were replaced by the rough, austere habit of the Benedictines. Her long, raven hair, once a source of her fiery individuality, was shorn without mercy. Her name, Mariana da Silva, the politically aware noblewoman, was erased, replaced by Sister Juana, a name that spoke of humility and obedience. Life as Sister Juana was a constant battle between her internal world and the external demands of the convent. The days were structured by rigid prayer schedules, long hours of silent contemplation, and demanding manual labor. There were no political debates, no discussions of social reform, only theological study and the meticulous copying of ancient texts. Her sharp mind, once engaged with the complexities of governance, was now forced to focus on the intricacies of liturgy. Sister Juana found herself suffocating in the quiet monotony. She missed the intellectual stimulation of discussions, the vibrant energy of Lisbon. She found tiny acts of defiance in the most unexpected places. During the communal reading of ancient texts, she would sometimes find a word or phrase that sparked a political thought, and she would dwell on it in secret, letting it fuel her inner resistance. She would sometimes use her knowledge of historical figures to draw parallels between their struggles and her own, maintaining a hidden intellectual life. She corresponded with her family, but her letters were heavily censored by the Mother Superior, stripped of anything that hinted at her true feelings or her political convictions. Her family, in turn, wrote of mundane affairs, never acknowledging her absence, never mentioning her former beliefs. They treated her as if she had truly chosen this path, her political views now erased, replaced by a convenient piety. Years passed. Sister Juana became a silent, contemplative nun, her outward composure hiding a spirit that still yearned for freedom and political engagement. She performed her duties with quiet precision, a model of monastic obedience, but her eyes held a deep, unreadable sadness, a silent testament to the life that had been snatched from her. Convent walls, meant to contain her inconvenient politics and ensure her family's prestige, had indeed silenced her voice in the outside world. But within the confines of her cell, Mariana da Silva, the unsuitable match, the politically aware woman, continued to live, her spirit unbroken, a heart-breaking testament to the power of family and state to crush individual will. Number 8. The rebellious daughter of Castile. Maria Elena de la Vega was a whirlwind of energy and defiance in 17th century Castile. As the daughter of a proud, traditional family of minor nobility, she was expected to be demure, obedient, and ultimately to make a respectable marriage that would enhance the family's standing. But Maria Elena was none of these things. She disdained embroidery and polite conversation, preferring to ride horses wildly across the family estate, to read forbidden adventure novels smuggled in by sympathetic servants, and to argue passionately against the stifling conventions imposed upon women. She dreamt of travel, of exploration, of a life beyond the confines of her family's expectations. Her father, Don Rafael, a man of rigid principles and an unshakable belief in his patriarchal authority, found Maria Elena's independent spirit not charming, but deeply alarming. Her refusal to conform, her outspokenness, and her outright rejection of several carefully arranged marriage proposals were not only an affront to his authority, but a serious threat to the family's honor and prospects. One particular incident sealed her fate. She had publicly ridiculed a pompous suitor, a man of significant wealth and influence, causing a scandal that threatened to ostracize the de la Vegas from polite society. Don Rafael saw only one solution to rein in his unruly daughter and restore the family's tarnished reputation: the convent. It was a common tactic in Spain to send rebellious or disobedient daughters to cloistered orders, not as a calling, but as a punitive measure, a way to break their spirit and ensure their compliance. Convent of las Descalzas Reales, a Franciscan order renowned for its severe discipline and rigorous enclosure, was chosen. It was a place designed to crush individuality and enforce absolute obedience. Maria Elena fought back with every ounce of her fiery spirit. She argued, she wept, she pleaded, she threatened to run away, to disgrace them further. But her father, unwavering, simply stated that she had left him no choice. This was for her soul's salvation, he insisted, but his eyes held the cold resolve of a man protecting his legacy. Her mother, heartbroken but powerless, could offer only silent tears. The journey to Las Descalzas Reales was a nightmare for Maria Elena. Carriage, usually a symbol of freedom for her adventurous rides, now felt like a cage. As the heavy, ornate doors of the convent swung shut behind her, the noise of the bustling streets of Madrid faded into an oppressive silence. The vibrant colors of her clothes, the warmth of the sun on her skin, were replaced by the cold, dim interior of the convent. Her luxurious silks were stripped away, replaced by the rough, plain habit of a novice. Her long, flowing hair, which she loved to let loose as she rode, was brutally shorn by the nuns, a symbolic severing of her worldly ties and her rebellious spirit. Her name, Maria Elena, was erased, replaced by Sister Inés, a name that spoke of meekness and humility. Life as Sister Inés was a relentless assault on Maria Elena's spirit. The days were an unending cycle of prayer, fasting, and grueling physical labor. The nuns rose before dawn, their voices chanting in the cold, echoing chapel. Hours were spent in silent contemplation, in meticulous cleaning, or in intricate embroidery that Maria Elena found suffocatingly tedious. The rigid discipline, the enforced silence, the constant surveillance, all combined to crush her will. Her passionate spirit was meant to be broken, her rebelliousness purged. She attempted small acts of defiance, often resulting in severe penances. She would hide a small, smooth stone in her habit, a reminder of the earth outside. She would hum a forbidden folk tune under her breath during prayer. Each act was met with quiet, firm punishment, extra hours of kneeling, colder meals, longer periods of silence. The nuns, though not overtly cruel, were unyielding in their mission to mold her into an obedient bride of Christ. They saw her defiance not as personal struggle, but as spiritual impurity. Slowly, painstakingly, the convent began to wear her down. The relentless monotony, the lack of personal space, the constant suppression of her desires, began to erode her vibrant spirit. The defiant glint in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a quiet, haunted sadness. She learned to feign piety, to perform her duties with a mechanical precision, her outward conformity hiding a core of silent grief and resentment. She would often gaze from her narrow cell window at the distant, sun-drenched hills of Castile, the places where she had once ridden so freely, longing for the wind in her hair, the open sky above her. Years passed, marked only by the changing seasons and the arrival of new, equally silenced novices. Sister Inez, the once rebellious Maria Elena, became a quiet, unassuming nun, her energy channeled into the rigid routines of monastic life. Her dreams of exploration and adventure faded into the realm of distant, painful memories. Convent of Las Descalzas Reales, meant to be a place of spiritual transformation, had instead become a tomb for a vibrant spirit, a testament to a father's unyielding authority and a society's unforgiving rules. Her story was a heart-breaking echo of countless others, silenced behind the heavy, silent walls of cloister. Number 9. The Scarlet Stain of Brittany. In the picturesque but deeply conservative region of Brittany, France, in the early 18th century, a young woman named Cécile Dubois found herself caught in a tragic web of societal judgment and family honor. Cécile was a vivacious, beautiful girl from a respectable but not wealthy family, who had made the grave mistake of falling in love with a charming, but ultimately unreliable, traveling merchant. Their secret meetings, fueled by youthful passion, led to an irreversible consequence. Cécile became pregnant outside of marriage. In a society where female virtue was paramount and illegitimacy was a profound shame, the news of Cécile's condition brought immediate and catastrophic dishonor upon her family. Her parents, devout Catholics and desperate to protect their standing in the small, close-knit community, were consumed by a mixture of shock, fury, and despair. Her father, a man who prided himself on his family's impeccable reputation, saw the scarlet stain of her perceived sin as a mark of ruin. The merchant, upon learning of the pregnancy, vanished without a trace, leaving Cécile utterly alone to face the consequences. The family's solution was swift and brutal, a desperate attempt to erase the scandal and salvage what little honor remained. Cécile was to be sent away hidden from public view, her pregnancy and the subsequent birth to be kept a complete secret. A local, lesser-known convent, the Benedictine Priory of Sainte-Marie des Fleurs, was chosen. It was a small, isolated community, a place where inconvenient truths could be buried. Her parents, desperate to avoid social ostracism and ensure the marriage prospects of Cécile's younger sisters, presented her forced entry as a penance, a path to redemption for her sinful behavior. Cécile, barely 18, was shattered. She faced not only the profound emotional and physical challenges of her pregnancy, but also the complete abandonment by her family and the terrifying prospect of a life confined. She begged, she pleaded, she wept for understanding, for mercy, for a different path. But her parents, blinded by shame and fear, were unyielding. They saw her tears as remorse for her transgression, not as despair for her stolen life. The day she was taken to Sainte-Marie des Fleurs was cold and bleak. The journey was filled with a chilling silence, her parents' faces grim and averted. As the plain, heavy wooden door of the priory closed behind her, Cécile felt a profound sense of isolation, a total severing from the world she knew. Inside, the walls were thick, the air heavy with the scent of old stone and damp earth. Her personal clothes were replaced by a shapeless, rough habit. Her long blonde hair, once adorned with ribbons, was unceremoniously shorn. Her name, Cécile, was replaced by Sister Augustine, a name chosen for its austere connotations. Life as Sister Augustine was a grueling, solitary ordeal. The nuns, most of whom had entered the convent as young girls and knew little of the outside world's complexities, were often judgmental, viewing Cecile's presence as a necessary evil, a reminder of worldly sin. She was assigned the most arduous tasks, often performed in isolation, scrubbing floors, working in the cold, damp laundry, and spending long hours in silent, solitary penance. Her pregnancy, initially hidden, soon became obvious, a visible mark of her shame. The disdain from some of the sisters was palpable, their prayers for her soul often feeling more like condemnations. The birth of her child was a traumatic, lonely event performed in secret within the convent's infirmary, attended by a stern, unfeeling nun. The baby, a tiny girl, was immediately taken from her, carried away to an unknown fate. Cecile was told the child would be placed with a wet nurse and then sent to an orphanage, its existence erased from her life, its very birth a secret never to be spoken of. The loss of her child, the severing of that primal bond, was a torment that transcended any physical hardship. Cecile, now Sister Augustine, moved through the days like a ghost, her heart a hollow ache. The repetitive prayers, the endless chores, the enforced silence, all served to numb her. She found small ways to cope: a quiet tear shed in the darkness of her cell, a fleeting touch of the cold stone wall, a silent prayer for her lost child. She learned to appear outwardly compliant, her face serene during communal prayers, but inside she was a maelstrom of grief, anger, and a profound, unending sorrow. Years passed, blurring into a monotonous rhythm. Sister Augustine became known for her quiet demeanor and her efficient, almost robotic, performance of duties. But beneath the surface, the wound of her lost child, the shame of her past, and the crushing weight of her forced enclosure remained raw and unhealed. She sometimes saw other young women enter the priory, their eyes wide with fear or resignation, and Cécile recognized the same lostness in their faces. The walls of Sainte Marie des Fleurs, meant to contain her sin and purify her soul, had instead become a monument to a life irrevocably broken, a mother forever separated from her child, and a heart-breaking testament to the brutal power of societal judgment and family honor. Number 10. The Unseen Dowry of Florence. Chiara Rossi lived in the heart of bustling Florence in the late 16th century, a city of art, commerce, and intricate social networks. She was the youngest of 4 daughters in a family of once prominent merchants whose fortunes had tragically dwindled. Her father, a man of pride, had struggled to provide suitable dowries for his first 3 daughters, each marriage a painful financial strain that chipped away at the family's remaining wealth. Chiara, with her quick wit, bright eyes, and love for storytelling, knew her family's desperate situation. She understood that her future, unlike her sisters, was not even destined for a modest marriage. There was simply nothing left. In Renaissance Italy, a dowry was not just a gift. It was a crucial component of a woman's value, a contractual agreement that secured her place and her husband's reputation. Without one, a woman's marriage prospects were non-existent, leaving her vulnerable and dependent. For families with too many daughters and too little wealth, the convent became an uncomfortably common, albeit significantly cheaper alternative. The dowry to God required for a convent placement, while still a financial burden, was often less than half of what a marriage dowry would demand, and it freed the family from any further financial obligation to the daughter. Chiara, at the tender age of 15, overheard the hushed, strained conversations between her parents. They spoke of the convent of Santa Cecilia, a local cloistered order known for its devout sisters and rigorous discipline. They spoke of it as a blessing, a path chosen by God, a way for Chiara to find spiritual fulfillment. But Chiara knew the bitter truth. She was being sent away because she was an economic liability, an unseen dowry that her family could not afford. She was a sacrifice to preserve the family's precarious status. She tried to protest, to speak of her quiet dreams, of a small life, of perhaps becoming a teacher or a scribe, of using her love for stories to bring joy to others. But her words were brushed aside as childish notions, as the temptations of the world. Her parents, caught in their own web of financial desperation and societal pressure, truly believed they were making the best choice, securing her future in a way they could afford, even if it meant sacrificing her freedom. The day she was escorted to Santa Cecilia, the vibrant colors and sounds of Florence seemed to fade into a dull, mournful echo. The heavy wooden doors of the convent, tall and imposing, seemed to swallow her whole. Inside, the world was hushed, dim, and overwhelmingly disciplined. Her simple but beloved dresses were stripped away, replaced by the rough, plain habit of a novice. Her long dark hair, which she loved to braid, was shorn without ceremony, a profound and symbolic severing of her worldly ties. Her name, Chiara, was erased, replaced by Sister Felicity, a name meant to reflect the spiritual joy she was expected to embrace, a joy she could not feel. Life as Sister Felicity was a constant, grueling rhythm of prayer, contemplation, and arduous manual labor. The days began before dawn, with the communal chanting of matins in the cold chapel. Hours were spent in silent devotion, in meticulous cleaning of the convent, or in endless repetitive tasks like embroidering altar cloths. The rigid discipline, the enforced silence, the constant surveillance by older nuns all conspired to crush her spirit. Her quick wit, once a source of delight, now had no outlet. Her love for stories and words found only an echo in the repetitive biblical readings. Sister Felicity. The vibrant Chiara struggled deeply with the loss of her freedom and the crushing monotony. She learned to perform her duties with a mechanical precision, her body present but her mind often adrift, replaying memories of the bustling Florentine markets, the scent of fresh bread, the sound of street musicians. She clung to these memories as a secret rebellion against the convent's attempts to erase her past and her true self. She found small, quiet ways to cope. When she was assigned to work in the convent's small library, she would steal precious moments to read, not just the permitted theological texts, but the dusty, forgotten histories and philosophical treatises that sometimes lay hidden on the shelves. She would immerse herself in the stories of ancient heroes, finding a fleeting escape from her own constrained reality. She also found solace in the methodical tasks, finding a quiet, almost meditative rhythm in the repetitive motions of scrubbing or sewing, allowing her mind to wander and create its own internal stories. Years blurred into decades. Sister Felicity became known for her quiet demeanor and her efficient performance of duties. Her bright eyes, once full of curiosity, now held a deep, unreadable sadness. She saw other young women enter the convent, some willingly, some, like her, driven by economic necessity, and she recognized the same quiet despair in their faces. Convent of Santa Cecilia, meant to be a place of spiritual solace, had instead become a silent monument to a life unlived, a dream unfulfilled, and a heart-breaking power of economic hardship and societal pressures that stripped women of their agency, forcing them into a cloistered existence, their unseen dowries paid in the currency of lost dreams.